Hello guys, and today I will do a tier list for all the tier 10s that you can play in Onslaught, because it's starting today, so I will just show you what I think are the best tanks and the worst tanks also. As you can see, I prepared them light tanks first, then medium tanks, then we have heavy tanks and tank destroyers. Also on different ranks, some tanks will be better, some tanks will be a bit worse, but this tier list is for the a bit higher ranks, although most of the tanks will be pretty similar to that. The last thing is what those tiers mean. So we have 7 tiers, as you can see. The first is the best tanks on every map. You don't even need to watch the map. You can auto pick those tanks. They will be great. The second tier is the best tanks, but on some maps they may be not as good. On the third tier, so the A tier, we have a bit worse tanks than on the S tier, and maybe a bit more situational. Also, they may be a bit harder to play. But if you have those tanks, you can play them instead of the S tier tanks, although they should be a bit worse. Then we have a B tier, which are tanks that should be significantly worse, but still playable, or maybe even extremely situational. Then we have C tier. Here are average tanks. Some of those tanks may be great for random battles, but in Onslaught they won't be that great. Then we have the D tier, where the tanks will be under average. If you play them, you will kinda throw, but you can still do something, although they will be pretty bad. And the E tier, the worst tanks, you basically can't pick worse. So first, we start with the Manticore, which is pretty good in random battles, great spotter, right? But in Onslaught, it is definitely the worst light tank, probably one of the worst tanks, because in Onslaught, the most important factor is basically the DPM and fighting values. So yeah, Manticore definitely won't be that good for it. RHM though, pretty good, definitely the best light tank. Probably the easiest one, but still light tanks are very hard. So if you can't play really light tanks and you want to gain points, then you shouldn't play them. Then we have EBR, which is pretty hard to play well, and it is strong, but I wouldn't say that it is as strong as the RHM, just because it's much harder to use. Then we have Tessak, and I would say that it is probably A tier. On some maps, pretty great, even better than RHM, especially in random Onslaught. On other maps, maybe not that good, but it has some nice things about it, right? Then we have Sheridan, which, although isn't as good, it's still okay. I would put it, I think, at C tier. Yeah, maybe, yeah. You can play this tank. It has DPM, although it doesn't have the HE shells of RHM. It is just a bit worse RHM with everything. So maybe B tier, but you can play it. People will hate it. On the small gun, remember to put the small gun, because troll gun is, I think, still not that good. Then we have this tank, the VZ. For a light tank, I would say it goes to the A tier. It's very underrated. After the buff, it has great DPM, almost probably the best in the light tanks, maybe second best, something like that. But it is smaller, much smaller than a RHM, and it's pretty fast as well. Although it doesn't have the HG shells, and the gun handling is still worse than the RHM. But I think that it is a good light tank, although a bit underrated. Then we have the IMX. That's a pretty bad tank. I would put it in D tier because the gun handling is bad, the light itself isn't great, and the DPM is also not good. You reload like 24 seconds for 1200 damage, which is terrible in Onslaught. Like Tessak deals similar amount of damage, on HE shells a lot more, but you have with Tessak a lot, you are smaller, you're just better than this tank, right? Reload a lot faster. Then we have T180, and I would also put it at B tier. The gun is pretty terrible, I would say, especially for worse players. I don't like this tank also that much, but it's still playable as a light tank. On some maps it might be even better than RHM because it is extremely small. You can hide behind basically anything. So that is all the light tanks. Remember, light tanks are for good players, or if you want to learn, but you will be ridiculed upon because you will play bad light tanks at start. So now we go to the medium tanks with the food, which gives everyone in your team something. 140 definitely the best, was the best in last Onslaught, still should be the best tank. Great for points, great for win rate. You just live with this tank, do a bit of damage, try to spam the perk, and you will support your team greatly. Now we have T62A, which is a bit worse Object 140, right? At least was before the... Now we have T62A, which was a bit worse 140 before the recent buffs. But now this tank is a lot worse. Although it's not as bad to put it in E tier, because it still has the best, probably the best perk in Onslaught, which is the food. The tank itself, I would say, is average. You could maybe put it below average, but the food itself is pretty great. The best perk for grinding points, definitely. And the tank itself is basically a bit worse 140 before the buff, which wasn't that bad, right? People will hate you for picking this tank because they overhate it, right? They think that it is like the worst tank in the game or something. But you can play with it, right? If you don't have anything else, it's okay. Action X, definitely S tier. Not as great as 140 on most of the maps, but before the 140 buff, this was the tank to go for the best food tank, definitely. Then we have Patton. Let's put it here maybe, because it's slow. It has great gun handling, but you don't really need that in Onslaught. The armor is not that great, and the mobility is also not that great. 1-1. 1-1 after the buff, I would say it's A tier. It doesn't have that much DPM, but it still doesn't struggle. It has 440 alpha damage with nice hit penetration, which is useful. Sometimes you can play it, but 140 is better most of the time. I try to play this tank. Sometimes if you want to play something different, definitely good pick. As well as 1-1B. Both tanks pretty similar. This tank has more penetration, better HE shells, less damage. Maybe a bit better than 1-1, but not by far. STB, basically worse. Action X, I would say, maybe, yeah, a bit worse, because in some situation on maps like Cliff, it can be good, but just take this tank most of the time and you are better, because it has better alpha damage, better armor, less squishy, faster. 1-1, I mean STB is not that great nowadays. M60, maybe you could put it here because it has mobility, but let's play it safe, put it in B tier. It's Patton, but faster and has less armor, although you don't really need the armor. You have great penetration, but you are extremely huge. You can play this tank sometimes, I have fun with it, and it's alright tank. Now we have the UDES. It is also a situational tank, but it is a pretty strong situational tank. On some maps, like Steps, I think, yeah, or Sand River, yeah, Sand River, this tank can be really powerful, because this tank is low to the ground, you can basically hide behind everything, and you have high alpha damage, so after one shot you should have your ability ready. Now we go to the tanks with the strike. So K91, I would say A tier, great DPM, great for sniping. You have decaps with your mechanic, so it's an okay tank. I would say it's a fun tank, but not for everyone, probably low alpha damage. But the shell velocity is great. This tank is definitely playable in Onslaught. We have AMX30B, and because this tank is not that good, you don't have penetration. The ability is not bad. Sometimes it's nice to have one medium with a strike, but why this medium should be AMX30B? There is just no reason. You have no armor, no penetration, and you have DPM, but it's hard to use this tank, especially with less players in the game. Then we go with CS, and I would say it's S tier because the fastest tank in the game, not including light tanks, and it is still faster than some. Any position you can go to, you will be first there for taking strikes. The DPM is nice, you have APCRs on gold. The tank itself is pretty okay, you can bounce some things. Definitely you can, on most of the maps you can use it. Maybe some of the tanks will be better than this one, but it's still a great tank. With the concept, I would say that it's a B tier. On some maps, it may be a very nice tank. 460 alpha damage. You are pretty fast. Have again the strike ability. Not on every map, but on some maps you may have fun. Leopard, the same as concept. Some will take concept over it, some will take Leopard. It has a bit better DPM. Camo doesn't really matter, but it has a better camo. You have a better reload time, but again you have less alpha damage. Both tanks are reasonably okay. Then we have the magazines from the medium tanks. So TVP, I personally would say this is A tier because you have a lot of DPM, but I understand that most of the players will find this tank hard to play because it's not as easy. You don't have much alpha damage. You have to pan your shots in order to load your ability. So definitely, I think that this tank is playable. On some maps, it may be even absolutely a good pick. But overall, it's an okay tank, good for Onslaught. Then we have the Progetto. So, overall, it's probably a D tier tank, maybe lower, but the ability makes up for it, in my opinion. Not as strong as some tanks, but the only thing that you lack in Progetto is the DPM. And with this ability, you gain some DPM, so it won't be as horrible as few tanks that will be in D tier. So yeah, definitely C tier will be, I guess, okay. Maybe low C tier, so keep that in mind. And Bachat, some people would go for it, go to the A tier, but for me, not really. It's still, after the buffs, it's an okay tank. I really don't enjoy it, but you can play with it. Definitely a strong tank, although not as easy to use as some of the heavy tanks or just simpler tanks. Then we have probably the best medium tanks. The best medium tank after 140 and even before it, because you can have basically all of your team can have E50M. I will put it above a bit. Just because you can blindly take into any battle E50M. The best ability, which is basically making your DPM much stronger. And yeah, tank itself has great HP, great mobility, great armor. You can ram stuff. Definitely good. And then we have the Object 430U, which is S tier for me. Although the gun handling is much worse than the E50Ms, you have the ability for that, because it also improves your gun handling. This tank sometimes may be even better, but overall, it's a bit worse E50M. So now, we have heavy tanks. E100 for me is S tier. You can't play it on every map, but on heavy tank maps, you can play it definitely. I find it a nice tank. Great DPM, the turret armor can bounce some things, and just the DPM itself is extremely powerful. Also, you have 4000 HP, so you can take a lot of damage. Maybe it isn't as easy to play as Type 5, but I think it may be a bit worse than Type 5, but still extremely powerful. Then we have Mouse. So if you understand how to play Mouse, if you can play it, then it will be A tier, I think. A bit worse than E100 now, a bit worse than Type 5, but still good. But for most players, it's B tier, because this tank, although shouldn't be that hard to play, it is, because you need to angle perfectly and understand what you want to do. And on lower levels, definitely, it will be hard for you. On higher levels, okay, but for many players, they will just struggle with the Mouse. Panzer 7, I would say it's an average tank. The ability, just as E100 and Mouse, is the heal. You can heal your allies as well, but overall this tank is a big weakness and has no DPM, which is probably the most important thing in the Onslaught mode. Then we have the Type 5. I think it is an S tier, easy S tier, definitely better than the E100. You have alpha damage, you have great armor, even versus good players you will bounce some shells always. You have a big weakness here, the Capola of course, but you deal 700 damage. HE shells are the most OP in the game. 1100 damage, 130mm of penetration, extremely strong tank. So yeah, definitely S tier. Not on all of the maps, but most of them you can play Type 5. Then we have ST2, which is for me also C tier as the Panzer 7. It's okay. It's pretty bad, right? But it is not as terrible as those two tanks. And you can play it. It's a normal heavy tank. Nothing special. You have two barrels, but it's not that easy to use them, especially in Onslaught. And also they don't give you that much damage. Then we have 705A. I think it's playable on some maps. Again, the DPM makes this tank a bit worse, but you are unbreakable when you angle. Basically no one can pen you. And cooldown, this tank is absolutely great. But overall, it's okay tank, I would say. Then we have IS-4, and I would put it even in the, I think, yeah, maybe A tier. Not as strong as those two, because no DPM, but on versus some tanks, this tank is extremely powerful. You have to a bit over angle just to let the enemies shoot you in the track, But overall, this tank is pretty much one of the best heavy tanks, definitely. Because it has a lot of HP, it has a good gun, a lot of penetration. Alpha damage is not that great, but this tank can tank a lot. Then we have BZ75. Probably this will be the biggest thing between the ranks. On top tier, definitely it will be S tier because it's a fast tank with a lot of HP and nice damage. So you can push anything, you can do it fast, which is important in Onslaught. On lower ranks, where the play is more about doing damage and being steady, it's not that great. But definitely in the higher ranks, this tank is one of the best. Then we have 113. I would say it's an average tank, maybe a bit better than those two. But overall, it's a normal heavy tank. The ability is pretty bad, not as good as heal. The ability is only for yourself, so those abilities are a bit worse most of the time. Then we have E5, which in random battles is probably one of the best tanks. But in Onslaught, it is, I would say, a little above average. Because the turret is still huge and everyone is more accurate. The ability got buffed, but it is still not that great. And the tank itself doesn't have much going for it. I mean, you aren't that fast. The armor is penetrable, especially because everyone can just shoot you better, because they are more accurate. So yeah, definitely not as bad as those tanks, because you have DPM and you can play this tank on some maps. But I wouldn't say it's that great. Then for, I would say it's average. Again, you have no DPM, and this tank has absolutely no DPM. The armor is okay, sometimes, but with better accuracy, you can struggle a lot, especially in higher ranks. You are slow, although not as fast. You are slow, although not as slow as those tanks. But yeah, this tank is not great. As is Super Conqueror, I would say you shouldn't really play it. The armor is not great if you know where to pen this tank. It's slow, the DPM is pretty bad, so yeah, this tank is average at best. Then we have the Type 71, and again, this tank is also average. The DPM, this tank struggles. Armor is not that great, and in Onslaught, this tank is not meta. Can opener. For me, this tank is C tier as well, but I will put it in D because it isn't that bad. The double shot is terrible in Onslaught because the accuracy doesn't improve it by much, so you still will miss a lot. The tank itself is slow, the armor is okay, but you don't have DPM. Again, the DPM is the most important factor. If you look at the list, if you look at the top tanks, most of them have great DPM, and this tank doesn't have great DPM. It's also slow, and from sides, it's not greatly armored. So yeah, definitely not meta, max B tier. Then we have Yo, which I think is maybe close to the S tier, but for now I will put it into A tier. The ability of this tank got buffed last season, so now the ability is not as useless. It's still not great, but the tank itself is also pretty okay. On some situations it will be great, like on Westfield, but on other maps it will be okay. On some maps you shouldn't play this tank at all, like Himmelsdorf probably, but overall it's a solid pick. Then we have the magazine tanks, and we start with AMX-50B. I think it's B tier. It's okay, for definitely hard to play because you have to know what you are doing. But the tank itself is okay. The ability is great for this tank. You are fast, although in this meta I wouldn't say that this tank is too good, because again you have no DPM. But if you know what you are doing, you can definitely use this tank well. Next we have Chirmmv. No DPM, at least pretty low DPM, and no penetration. So this tank cannot go higher than C tier. You have great armor, but this is probably the end of the nice things about this tank. The DPM is important in this mode, and you have not that high, and the penetration is bad. Also, you aren't that fast as AMX-50B to just go any higher. Now probably we have the worst heavy tank, Chirmmv. Again, here DPM is the best, and this tank has no DPM. Also, this perk for this tank is horrible because it basically gives you a bit faster clip and you are more accurate, which this tank absolutely doesn't need, because if you shoot all of your bullets in this tank you have 0 DPM, and even if you want to shoot them all, you will have to wait like 3.5 seconds with the ability. So this tank definitely terrible, terrible, absolutely, don't pick it. Then we have Stinger or T-57 Heavy. I would put it in A tier. Was earlier, I would say, in the S tier, but nowadays they are just stronger tanks, and on random onslaught it isn't that great. But again, you have DPM, you have fast clip, you have great penetration, a lot of HP, so this tank won't be a bad pick on most of the maps. As for 60 TP, I would put it in B tier, because even though it's slow and doesn't have much DPM, you can still play it, I guess, pretty well. If you know what you are doing, especially in lower ranks, this tank can be good, although it's not that great also. So low B tier, but it's playable, alright? Although in higher ranks you don't see it at all, for a reason. Then we have the VT. I would put it probably here as well. Worse size 7 because you have worse armor, but overall it is pretty fast. Use the solo gun because it's more reliable, and yeah, this tank is okay, I would say. You are fast, the ability is pretty okay. I mean, it's one of the worst abilities, but not the worst. So it's okay. 277, I guess you can put it here because, I mean, I don't like it. It doesn't have that much armor. It is fast, but the gun is unreliable. I mean, you could put it here, but I don't like this tank, so C tier for me. Then we have IS-7, which is, I would say, S tier, maybe even A tier. But yeah, because although it's super easy to use, so maybe even S tier. You just go forward with your team, you push, you take damage, and you done your part. If you are playing in a higher lobby, you can play this tank on any map. Just push, listen to your teammates if they know what they are doing, and great tank. You just push in, take damage, and set your team up for a win. Then we have VZ, the Chinese one. I would say it's good. It has some DPM. The armor is not that great, the perk is also not that great, but you can use this tank sometimes. If you don't have tanks from here, it's okay, it's okay. Then we have the VZ, the Chinese tank destroyer, 113 VZ. I would say B tier. The ability is great, because you just take less damage, so it makes your opponents have less DPM. You have a lot of penetration, but this tank isn't that great as other tank destroyers. It's playable, definitely. You could maybe put it higher if you like it, but it's definitely playable. You have some DPM, you have some armor, you have some mobility. Overall, solid choice. Then we have Jagdpanzer. Maybe I should put it in C tier, but on some maps you kinda can play it, right? 1000 damage on like Ensk, you just stay still in the rails. 1000 damage for 3 shells, you have 3000 damage, you did your thing, you can tank, so you can take some damage. It's an okay tank, definitely playable on some maps, sometimes, right? Then we have E4, and for me it's S tier, extremely easy to use, high penetration, APCRs, HE shells are also great. You have a turret, which is extremely important, because your ability makes your trucks have 1 HP. So if anything touches your trucks, they will go down, which means having a turret is extremely important. Overall, this tank, even though it doesn't have a lot DPM, you just pick a corner, deal 750 damage, go back with your ability, you take less damage. Yeah, great tank, on many maps you can play it. Then we have E3, and even though it's kinda similar to the E4, it's a lot lower. I would say even D tier, maybe even C tier. Yeah, even C tier, because it's slower than E4. The ability of this tank is taking less damage, but the trucks are one-shottable, which means that you can be easily outmaneuvered. You get permatracked easily, and in higher ranks you will get just permatracked and you won't be able to do anything. So definitely you have to watch out for this pick. Then we have Błyskawica. Overall, I would say S tier. You have one of the highest DPMs. You are also one of the fastest tank destroyers. Great for pushing. You just go forward, go with your team, go into the enemy, into their face, then bam, you do as much damage as possible, take little damage, and just simple like that. Although you have to go with your team and you have to watch out for the perma track, so maybe taking 2 repair kits is an okay choice, I would say. But yeah, definitely a great Minotaur. I would say also C tier, although you don't have DPM, You take less damage, you have a turret, you can play cooldown a bit. On lower ranks it may be okay, but on higher ranks there is no reason to play this tank. Then we have Badger. I would say sometimes you can use it, definitely. On Westfield, probably an okay pick. Maybe you can play it also on the Prohorovka. Overall, you have the high DPM, which is of course an advantage. The gun can definitely do a lot of things. You have nice damage, nice HE shots. You can play this tank sometimes. It's not that great as the higher tanks, but on some maps it may be actually good. So then we have Foch B, and those 4 tanks. They all have the ability to heal back the HP enemy shoots you for when you have the perk active. So this makes this tank absolutely great at solo engagements. So if you find anyone being like left alone, go for him, put 2400 damage into him, heal back your HP, and you made a great trade. On lower ranks, if you know what you are doing, if you can find isolated targets, if you can flank OP, on higher ranks, a bit harder to play, but absolutely strong tank. Foch 155, I would say it is an E tier, just because the gun handling is terrible. You reload faster than this tank, you have less damage than this tank. This makes your ability less useful because you won't have it as much. This tank is basically 10 times worse Foch B. Even though you have alpha damage, you can miss those shells. If you miss one, you do 1/3 of the damage less. Terrible pick, even though it may look similar. It's not. It's not. Just don't pick this tank. Absolutely. If you want to find out how bad it is, you can play it, but it's definitely not a good tank. Then we have this tank, which is Death Star. I would say it's sometimes usable. Sometimes if you play okay, it can be alright. You also have the heal back ability, which if you use well, definitely you can play this tank. Pretty alright. Although, for most players it's C tier or D tier because you will throw the game. You don't really need to snipe that much. If you know what you are doing, go into the B tier for this tank, I think. Then we have a bit worse Death Star for me, so C tier. You just take a lot more of the HE damage and you basically don't have anything for that. It's basically a bit worse Death Star, at least for me. Then we have the Object 268 with a turret, so version 5. I would say B tier, even though this tank is pretty terrible in random battles. You have a great ability which makes your gun a lot better, and you have more DPM. So with that, this tank is pretty okay sometimes. I mean, there are better tanks, like Hori and 268, but this tank definitely can be usable, just because of the strong perk. And also you have the great penetration on all of the shells, so 750 damage or 1100 is pretty nice. Then we have the 268. I would say it's C tier, maybe B tier, but you don't have DPM. The perk is not that great for this tank because again you don't have a turret. And it's okay for pushing, but why don't you just take Błyskawica? I don't know. You deal with this tank a lot more damage. You have different armor, let's say. You are probably a bit faster or the same, but just the DPM itself is like 10 times better. This tank is out of meta and will be for a while definitely. Then we have the Hori. For me, I will put it in the A tier because it's usable, absolutely usable. Although a bit slow, the ability is great. The AP pen is great. You can absolutely use this tank pretty well. Then we have the 268, which for me is S tier. It might be a bit hard for the worse players or the players in lower ranks, but this tank is extremely powerful. You are fast, you have okay DPM, but the ability itself makes this the DPM like but the ability itself makes this DPM a lot better, which means that this tank can dish out a lot of damage. With HE shells, you can sometimes reload like 4 seconds or even less. So definitely a strong pick if you know what you are doing here. Then we have the STRV. I would say it's okay, it's situational. On some maps you can play it like Westfield. Definitely an okay pick, sometimes depending on what your team is doing. But overall, your team needs to play for you, so it's sometimes maybe not a smart pick. I would say the same for Grille. On some maps, if you know what you are doing, it's a strong tank. But you need to watch out, because on most maps, when the Grille is great, there are planes. And if you get spotted in a Grille in a bad position, you can just disappear like in a second. And then we have the last tank, which is the SP14. It will probably be also here with the snipers. It has, again, the sniper role. it has a better HP than the Grille. It is a bit slower than the Grille, but you have a turret and you have a bit better armor, right? So we'll see how good this tank will be, but it should be okay. Overall, probably nothing really special. So yeah, that is probably it. Maybe you could put the heavy tanks a bit higher, all of them, at least few of them. But why would you play them if there are just stronger heavy tanks here? Those tanks are situational, sometimes they are great. Those tanks are just a bit worse tanks from the higher tiers. So that's it for my tier list. Let me know what you think. Let me know what are your favorite tanks or your best tanks. And yeah, we will see how will this season of Onslaught go. Have fun guys and enjoy it.